Good evening, everyone. I hope that you're able to be here with us tonight. I'm assuming you are, although I can't see you. I wanted to start tonight by welcoming everybody and sharing a little bit about who we have speaking to us tonight. Tim Summerlin was baptized here in Indianapolis way back in 1981 and has been around the churches for many years in many places. In 1988, he was part of the mission team sent to Birmingham, England, came back to the States and was with the St. Louis Church in 1989. In 1998, he moved to Dallas, Texas, and then relocated to Denver, Colorado, where he has been since the year 2003. Uh, Tim has a master's degree in counseling, and in 2009, he completed his PhD in education and counseling out there in Colorado. He's the author of 2 books and has designed a very innovative program for a recovery program for church settings. For the last 30 years, Tim has worked as a counselor and is an adjunct professor at the University of Denver. He now also serves as the dean of the counseling program at Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology. So, Tim, we're super grateful to have you here tonight to teach on the subject stress in the storm. Certainly an incredibly important lesson for us during this time in our country's history. After Tim's presentation, he's going to be available for a brief time of questions and answers. You can post your questions in the comments section, or you can text them directly to Eric at 317-701-3544. Before I hand it over to Tim, let's go to God in a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you so much that we can be here together tonight. We thank you that we can be with our brother Tim and the history he has here with our congregation here in Indianapolis. We pray that through him you would give us wisdom to have calm and peaceful hearts during this incredibly challenging time in our nation and world. Father, we know many during the COVID era have struggled to face this time without Jesus, our family, our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors. And we pray that you would lead us to those whose hearts have been opened during this time. Give us the courage to speak up, the love to speak up, and help us to have a great impact on our community as we strive to be a light to the city of Indianapolis. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Tim, great to have you. I'm going to sign off, not take any more of your time, and we'll.
Great, Dave. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I want to give you greetings from Denver, Colorado to one of my favorite bunch of people in the whole wide world, the Indianapolis Church. And my name is Tim Summerlin, if I don't know you yet. This is a very important night for me. I always long to be back in Indianapolis, and as I've told Dave and others, I owe my salvation in many ways to the church there in Indy. And so I'm just very excited to be with you guys tonight. I've got dear friends back there, the Farkases and the Cruisers and Van Hords, of course, the Eastmans. Dave did my wedding for me. Very dear friends of ours. So thank you for having me on tonight. And I'm excited to teach about anxiety. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you, so you don't have to see me the whole time. And then when we get finished tonight, we will definitely have some time for questions and answers. So yeah, my name is Tim, and I lead a ministry called Disciples in Motion. We get to travel around the world and teach churches about mental health in the church setting, and we've developed a couple of ministries on grief and on recovery that are pretty innovative, kind of different from the old recovery ministries we might be used to. So that's what I do. That's what I get my my greatest joy from. So before I get going, I got to introduce you to my family. I want to update you guys. This is my family, and I have a daughter named Danielle. She was actually born in Indianapolis, and she's married to Adrian. They just got off the mission team in China. They've been in China for 10 years, and they just moved back to our home. And that's my son, Tim. You guys might know him, remember him as Timmers. And he still lives over in Hong Kong right now. He's working on a PhD in public health. And my daughter and her husband, Adrian, moved back into our home back in December. And we had little Elsa join us there. She's my granddaughter, my very first grandchild. And you'll notice if you look very closely at Elsa, she has a little stuffed animal. And if you look closely, you're going to see it's an Indiana University stuffed animal. So I am training her early to be a Hoosier. Just thought you might like that. Anyways, that's my family. And she's definitely the joy of my life right now. And that's my wife, Jackie, in the background. She gives her love to you guys. She was also converted in Indianapolis back in the early 80s. She wanted to be here tonight, but they had to take little Elsa to the doctor real quick. She had her first fall out of bed session today where somebody turned their back on her. She fell out of bed. They just want to take her in for a quick examination, but I think she's fine. Anyways, Jackie does send her love to everybody. So we want to spend some time tonight talking about anxiety. And if you're like me, it's kind of hard to take notes sometimes. I'm going to go pretty fast. So I want to give you an opportunity, if you would like to, if you go to my website, inmotioncounseling.org, you can get a free download of the class notes tonight. And it's basically my PowerPoint that you can just download on your computer. And then also you can sign up if you want. I send out a weekly mental health blog on mental health in the church setting. So it's kind of designed for Christians in mental health. So again, if you go to inmotioncounseling.org, you'll see some buttons on the top right-hand corner of the webpage, and you can just download those notes for yourself. And I'll put this slide up when I'm finished tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk to you about stress in the storm, Jesus the calm. You know, we're all dealing with something that's totally taken us by surprise, right? None of us saw this thing coming back in March. And here it's been like 7 months now or something, and we're just still struggling with it. We're dealing with it. Some of us actually love this stuff. some of us introverts, we kind of like this whole thing about being quarantined in our homes, you know. And so it's actually worked well for some of us, but many of us struggle with this kind of thing. We struggle with anxiety. Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe your household doesn't work well. And there might be strife and tension inside your home. Perhaps you've known people who you've lost due to this horrible virus that's going around. I lost a very dear friend of mine, a colleague of mine, back in April, and it still stings to this day to know that she's no longer with us. So many of us, either we're struggling with things, or we definitely know people that are. You know, in a church like Indianapolis Church, where you guys are really close to each other, you know each other's lives, I'll bet you know somebody that's struggling with anxiety. So I want to talk about anxiety tonight. And like I said, I'm going to kind of run through some stuff. So make sure you go back and get those notes later. But I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about how God looks at anxiety and what are some of the things we can do to help each other out, because there's stuff we can do. We're not a victim to this thing, especially as Christians. We have a lot we can do to overcome our anxiety. You know, God understands anxiety. The Bible says in Psalm 139, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." You know, God knows all about anxiety, and we're going to see in just a moment how much He knows about it. The issue is usually ourselves and what we know about anxiety and how we handle our anxiety. So God knows about anxiety. As a matter of fact, God created anxiety and He created depression. Somebody once said anxiety and depression are kind of like cousins. They're very similar in some ways. And I want to remind us that, first of all, God understands and knows and has designed these for our good. There are some parts of anxiety and depression that are actually very godly. And I want to remind you of those before we jump into some of the difficult parts of anxiety. God designed anxiety for safety. A couple months ago, I was up at Estes Park at a campus retreat speaking, and I saw a sign up there. It was like, "Beware, bears in the area." And late at night, about 10:30 at night, I'm walking back to my cabin, and I remembered that sign, like, "Oh shoot, there's bears out here." And the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. What was that? That was the human design of God to remind me that I need to be safe. You're driving down the highway, and out of the corner of your eye, you see a dump truck getting ready to run a stop sign and hit your car. What do? You don't stop and think, what should I do in this situation? You automatically hit the brakes and steer away from that danger. Anxiety is given to us by God for our protection and our safety. How about depression? Depression is given to us for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is depression is a feature of our creativity. In other words, the people that are the very best songwriters, singers, authors, actors typically have a melancholic spirit or heart. They typically struggle with depression. That's why you do see more suicides in those industries, because depression allows us to go inside of ourselves and be creative. So it's a feature that makes our world like a better place. Depression is also given to us by God to help us understand the need for rest. Oftentimes, people that are depressed, they're simply it's a indicator that they're not resting, which we will talk about in a moment as well. Both of these issues also can come upon us, and they offer us an opportunity for humility. I'll let you know that I struggle at times with anxiety. I've had panic attacks before. Members of my family also struggle with these things. And one of the things it's done for me, as well as my family, is it's humbled us in some ways. It's reminded me that I am not all about, I don't have the ability to always control myself. In other words, there's parts of me that I'm not in perfect control of. There is somebody larger than me and greater than me, and that would be God. So it's an opportunity for humility. And then finally, when we struggle with anxiety and depression or any other mental health issue, they present to us opportunities for growth. The Bible says in James chapter 1, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds." Why? Why would we consider that joy? One of the reasons is because it provides an opportunity for growth. It's a testing of our faith that leads to perseverance and character change. So those are some areas that I want to remind us all of, that when we struggle, we haven't caught God unawares. God understands this stuff. But as you all know, that there are times when our struggle gets too much for us. In other words, there are times where there are challenges and dangers. And I want to remind you as church members of a couple of those as you work with one another. We never want to blow this stuff off. One of the things that we've seen recently in the ICOC churches is a proliferation of suicide and self-harm. I had 2 phone calls a week ago from 2 different churches in the U.S. where they suffered with current members of the church who killed themselves. And I'm working with many people over the U.S. in this area. It's one of the areas of great concern that I have. The reason being is in our DNA in the ICOC, our DNA is to be very honest with one another and to bear our hearts. So when you hear people talk about suicide and self-harm, please take it very seriously and always get help for that situation immediately. Never, ever, ever try to pray that away or explain it away. Simply get professional help involved for people that struggle with that. And if you're somebody that does struggle with it, please understand that you're not in trouble, okay? Sometimes people think they're in trouble when they struggle with suicide ideation. You're never, ever, ever in trouble, okay? We just simply want to get the help you need so you can move on in your life in a more productive way. Also, anxiety can lead to distrust. I know people that have a lot of anxiety in their lives, and it can cause them to struggle with trusting God and trusting other people. So be aware of that with yourself and with your friends. And then finally, discouragement and isolation. During this time of the pandemic, there's a great tendency to isolate ourselves and to become discouraged. And so as a church, please continue to look around at those that you love the most and make sure that there's not isolation going on. Let's be encouraging one another. Let's help each other with our faith in God. One of the things I've realized about the pandemic is that we don't have church events anymore, right? We've got our Sunday church, and maybe some of you are starting to meet together. But it's a great time to get back to the foundation and the roots of what we're all about. Our relationship with Jesus. That's what we're all about. That's what we live for. That's what's important to us. Those are the things that we want to be building during this strange time of our lives. So these are some of the issues with anxiety and depression. Now I want to get into kind of the meat of my discussion tonight. And I want to share with you a couple thoughts here about anxiety. So stay with me on these, okay? Because I think they're going to make sense to you. But there's been a lot of good research lately on anxiety, and we're really, the scholars are shifting gears on how to deal with this phenomenon. So I want to explain to you a little bit about anxiety in the brain. It's very interesting. I call this the irony of anxiety. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that anxiety is given to us by God for our protection. And so certainly we need anxiety in our brain. We have that freeze, fight, or flight part of our brain that allows us to kick into gear when we need to be protected. So if you're being chased down by a bear or something's going on, then we want our brain to kick in and get those endorphins going and get the and get the body out of danger, right? But what happens is our brain begins to try to protect us when it doesn't need to. In other words, we overdo it. And that's the irony of anxiety. The interesting thing about anxiety is the more, so let me explain it this way. Our anxiety is there to protect us, but what happens is when we give in to it, it does the exact opposite. It does not protect us. It makes life more difficult. Think of it this way. Let's say you're in a classroom and you're learning something, the professor or the teacher's talking to you, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not understanding this material, right? I've been there many times my whole life. What should we do? When we don't understand something in the classroom, we should raise our hand and say, hey, teacher, would you re-explain that to me? But what does our brain do oftentimes? Our brain says, don't raise your hand. You're going to look like a fool. You're going to look stupid, right? So we give into our anxiety and we don't take a risk. We don't raise our hand. And what happens? We don't learn the material. And when the time for the test comes along, we don't do well. And we actually become what we were afraid of. We become, in a sense, stupid, right? Because we didn't learn the material, because we were afraid to raise our hands, because our brain was protecting us when it shouldn't have been, and we gave into it. That's the irony of anxiety, is that it's intended to protect our lives, but when we give into it too quickly, it does the exact opposite. It hurts us. We don't grow. I remember as a little boy, there was this cute little girl that I wanted to talk to, right? And every time I wanted to go up and talk to her, my brain would say, don't do it, Tim. You're going to look like an idiot. You're going to look like a fool. So what happens? I never went and talked to her. And what happens? I never got to know her. It didn't protect me at all. I missed out on a great chance to meet, this little girl as a little kid. I wanted to know her. So one of the things is we want to remember is that the irony of anxiety is that it can overdo it in our lives. We don't always want to give in to that protection feature. There are times in our lives where what we have to do is push through anxiety. We have to make a decision to not protect us, right? How many of you guys have become Christians because somebody out there in the church decided to push through their anxiety and invite you to come out to church anyways? Or maybe they decided to push through their anxiety and say something to you that radically changed your life, right? So we've all benefited from those who have pushed through anxiety. They denied the quote protection that it was offering them, and they did what they're supposed to do. Now, here's another one that I find pretty interesting. I call this the paradox of anxiety. The paradox, the paradox of anxiety is this. It's kind of like, y'all know what a Chinese finger torture thing is? It's this little web that you put on your two fingers. And it's like the more you pull on it, the harder it gets to pull your finger out of it. It's like a trap. The paradox of anxiety is this. The more you deny your anxiety, the more you decide not to push through your anxiety, the harder it gets to ever do it. So again, let's go back to that example of you're in a classroom setting and you're not understanding it, and you decide you should raise your hand, but you decide not to. What happens? The next time that you decide I need to raise my hand, it makes it harder to do so. In other words, you're almost discipling yourself to get worse and worse. It's horrible. The more often you decide not to push through your anxiety, the more often that you make a decision not to do something, the harder it gets to ever do it. And you probably understand that in your own life. There's probably been times, guys, that you've wanted to do something, and the more often you don't do it, you finally decide, I'm just not going to do it. It's not even worth it. So that's called the paradox of anxiety. So bottom line is anxiety can really push us around at times. But let's get into some solutions here for a moment. I love this quote. It says, I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. There's things in our lives, church, that we can't control. We might have bosses at work that cause us anxiety. Maybe we have a job that's anxious inducing. Maybe there's relationships in our life that are just going to be there and they're going to induce anxiety, and we can't change those relationships. There's things that we can't do. Some of us were simply born with stuff inside of us that we have no idea how it got there. I have no idea why I have panic attacks when I do. I just do. And so I can't tell you how it got there. I can definitely always change or adjust my sails to get where I want to go. In other words, there's things that I can do to mitigate and help me get through life. I think it was Charles Swindoll said this once. He said, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. Isn't that true for you? Haven't you noticed that no matter what happens, there's always a way out? There's always a way to mitigate and change the things that happen in your life to bring about victory. And isn't that like our God? I think that's when God shines the greatest, is when we're up against the wall a little bit. We're not quite sure what to do, but we work on it and we adjust ourselves to reach our destinations. So I want to talk to you about a couple concepts here with anxiety. First of all, I'm going to be a little preachy here for a minute, okay? So I know Dave's your preacher, but I'm going to go ahead and be a little preachy here. Here's a couple thoughts for you about anxiety. First of all, God, we want to listen to God. Psalm 46:10, the Bible says this. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. It's a very interesting psalm because the psalmist, if you read the whole psalm, you'll find out he was in the middle of some very challenging situations. There were people and nations around him that were not doing well. Kind of like our culture today. I don't know if you got to enjoy that debate last night, but that was a disaster. And, if that's an indication of where my country's going, then we got to solve some serious problems. But in the very midst of that, here's what God says to his people is be still and remember that I am still God. No matter what goes on in our hearts, no matter what goes on in our families, in our church, our communities, or around our country, God is still God. That's why we sit down every morning and we open up our Bibles and we read the Word of God. That's why we take those walks out in the woods to have prayer time with God. That's why we go out and look at the mountains, or we look at the beautiful scenery of Indiana. I love the cornfields out in Pittsburgh, man. Those things are gorgeous when the sun's setting. Those things remind me that God is still in control. He will be exalted among the nations, and our job is to simply line up with that. Let me share one more thought with you about this before we move on. One of the 10 commandments is the Sabbath. As a matter of fact, the Bible says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. It's really interesting. Of the 10 commandments, it's the only commandment that we try to excuse away. It's the only one that we have reasons for that we're not going to obey. It's interesting because that commandment is by far the largest of all the commandments. It's 108 words. Most of the commandments are like one sentence: do not murder, do not steal, those kind of things. This one's 108 words. Why? Because God's serious about it. God is telling us that we need to take time every day, every week, and on a more consistent basis throughout the year to spend time simply being quiet, being with him, reflective, resting. We have a hard time with this one, guys. It is not within our DNA to take Sabbath days or to take Sabbath time. But God is serious. And I want to ask you a question. If in your heart you're fighting this, I want to ask you, what does it tell God when we ignore this command? Right? I was talking to a really good friend of mine the other day about it. And he's a busy guy. He's busy. He said, Tim, I don't have time for a Sabbath. I just don't have time for that. And I thought, what does that tell God when God says, you kind of do need it? Like, I made you and I know you. So I want to ask you guys, are you taking time? And I can't tell you how to do a Sabbath. My Sabbath is on Friday afternoons in my yard, pulling weeds and mowing the grass. It's where I come up with some of my best thoughts. It's where I contemplate, I think, I pray. It's out in the yard, a couple hours every Friday. Find yourself a Sabbath, okay? So I want to close out talking to you about Jesus, okay? I love Jesus. I love this man. He has radically changed my life. And one of the interesting things I find about Jesus is any research I've ever done in mental health, if it works, if it's true, like it's proven as good research, I can always go back to the scriptures and find him doing it somewhere in some fashion. So I want to talk to you about Jesus for a moment. I want to talk to you about how Jesus demonstrates for us ways of getting through our anxiety. And I'm going to talk to you about 2 slides and then we'll finish up tonight. I want to talk to you about calming strategies. These are strategies that we have to do in order to divorce ourselves from our anxious brain at the appropriate times. Remember a few slides ago, I talked about how anxiety jumps in and kind of pushes us around when it's not supposed to, right? I'll give you an example real quick. A day or two after Danielle had her baby, we were all at the hospital, and somebody said, "Hey, let's go get some takeout." So I said, "I'll get it." So I drove over. We ordered Indian food, right? And I said, I'll go get it and bring it back to the hospital. We have a big old celebration dinner. So I went, we ordered about $90 worth of Indian food for 4 of us. And it was a lot. And so I'm driving over there and I was thinking, okay, now what kind of tip should I leave this guy? Like, what do you leave a tip for when you just go pick stuff up? I never know what to do with that. So I had decided the amount of money I want to give him. And I got in the restaurant and I'm up there and he gives me these bags of food. And then he turns the iPad over to me And it was like a bunch of numbers I had not seen yet. And there's people standing behind me, and my anxious brain kicked in and was like, hurry up, Tim, hurry up, hurry up. And so I just hit 20%. I think I hit 20%. I ended up giving this guy like an $18 tip for handing me 2 bags of food. And I left the restaurant. I thought, why did I just do that? I had already decided what to give him, but I realized that was an example of my anxious brain kicking in when it didn't need to. And I kind of like obeyed it. Maybe you've done stuff like that before. Maybe you've been in an argument with your spouse and you said something because you were like fearful or something. Your brain says, say something, and you said something. You're like, I can't believe I just said that. There are many times in our daily lives where we have to calm ourselves down for just a moment in order to divorce ourselves from our anxious brain and access our rational brain, our loving brain. This is very important. And we do calming before we do coping. The slide after this is on coping. So let's talk about Jesus for a minute. There's a great story in the Bible where Jesus is kind of like hanging out with everybody. And all of a sudden, the Pharisees, all the religious guys come up to him. And I think they planned this. They threw this woman down in front of him. She had been caught in the act of adultery. It was probably orchestrated. And one of them yells out at Jesus. He goes, hey, Jesus, hey, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law says to stone her. What do you say? Think about what was going on here for Jesus. Here he is. He's got 3 massive challenges sitting in front of him. He has a woman who was caught in the act of adultery who needed compassion. This woman was hurting. And Jesus, being who he is, he needed to give her compassion. Number 2, he had a law that he had written that he needed to update, or not update, but uphold. He needed to uphold the law that he had written. And number 3, he had a bunch of religious guys that somehow he needed to help them to maybe find humility, right? They were misapplying the law. And so Jesus had 3 major issues at once. If he had given into his anxious brain, he might have turned over and rebuked the woman. What are you thinking? How'd you get caught doing that? His anxious brain might have pushed him into, jumping into a theological discussion on the law that would have just confused everybody. Or he might have turned over and rebuked the Pharisees, like, get out of here, you brood of vipers, and just given them a hard time. He could have done any one of those 3 things. So what did Jesus do? Right? He bent over and he wrote something in the dirt. And I don't think he wrote anything. I think he just scribbled in the dirt. I think he doodled in the dirt. And he stood up. And then the Bible says he bent over again. In other words, he stood up and he was like, oh, I need some more time. And then he bent over again and wrote in the dirt. You see, Jesus needed a few moments to divorce his anxious brain from his loving, logical brain. And then he stood up that second time. And what a master, right? He looks at the men and he goes, hey, which one of you guys have never sinned? You go ahead and throw the first rock. And it's really funny. I think it's funny because the older guys dropped their rocks right away and walked away. They're like, oh, busted. The young guys kind of held on to their rocks for another moment. And then he looks at the woman and he goes, hey, where did they all go? Has no one condemned you? Then neither do I. Leave your life of sin, right? In 3 questions, Jesus solved all 3 of his problems. He was able to have compassion on that woman, radically change her life. He was able to uphold and explain the law that he had written. And he was able to help those self-righteous religious guys go back and scratch their heads and maybe examine their own hearts and their own sin. You see, Jesus used calming strategies in order to help people around him. So here's a couple I want to remind you of. We have calming strategies for our body, breathing, stretching. In our mind, we can do mindfulness, humor, our senses, music, lotion, scents. Some people like to journal or kind of vent with others. There's things that we can do that help us to take a few moments to separate our anxious brain away from our loving, logical brain. You can Google this stuff. Some of you guys already know a lot about this. Practice this stuff when you're not anxious. Practice it at times when you're doing well. Even a quick breath, like we call those cleansing breaths, where you just breathe in slowly with your nose as if you're like smelling a rose or something. And then you hold it for 4 or 5 seconds. And then you slowly breathe out as if you're blowing on hot soup or something. It's amazing. Just doing that once or twice, you just feel better. You're like ready to do something more loving and logical. How about coping strategies? When we do coping strategies, one of the things we teach people to do is to question and challenge your anxiety. We want to engage our anxiety. We don't want to always medicate it. Now, I'm not down on medication, guys. Don't get me wrong there. Medication definitely has a role. I've had to take medication myself, but there's ways that we can challenge by questioning our anxiety. The psalmist did that. He said, "Hey, why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me?" He was questioning his issues in his life. So here's a couple coping strategies you can do. One, I've had to do this before, is we can look at the consequences and the risk versus reward of our anxiety. Here's one of the things I did. So I get to fly a lot. I fly all over the world for this In Motion ministry. And I got to the point where my anxiety was kind of pushing me around. And I started to think like, I don't think I can get on an airplane again. Like an idiot, I went out and I read about airplane crashes. If you're afraid of flying, never read about what happens in an airplane crash. It's not helpful at all. Okay. But I did that. And so I started feeling kind of challenged about the idea of getting on an airplane. And so one of the things I would have to do is I have to get an argument with my anxiety brain. My anxiety brain goes, "Hey, Tim, this thing might crash. There's only like 5 inches between you and 36,000 feet. Do you know that?" And so I'd have to get in an argument and say, "Yeah, brain, you're right. But the statistics that I've read indicate that I'm safer in an airplane than I am at home." And my anxiety brain like, yeah, but what about this? And then we go back and forth. And I finally made decisions like, okay, I know there is some danger, but the rewards for that danger are much greater than the risk involved. In other words, what I'm getting ready to go do, maybe the people I'm going to go see, those rewards for all of us are much greater than this minor risk that I'm taking. So sometimes when you're facing anxiety and you're making decisions not to do something that you should do, think about the risk versus reward. You're afraid to go knock on somebody's door or invite somebody to church. Think about the reward. I want to tell you, Mike Hayes, back in the day, back in 1979 or 78 or some year, he would knock on my front door at my mom and dad's house and invite me to soul talks. The guy must have been terrified. I had long hair. I was a drunk. I was belligerent. That guy was just as calm as can be. I would make fun of him. Mike understood the reward versus the risk of maybe himself looking like a fool. Okay, always argue with your anxiety brain if there's a greater reward involved. You can always negotiate exposure. In other words, if you're anxious about something, expose yourself to a little bit of that something and then increase the exposure until you're good with it. And then finally, guys, with anxiety, sometimes what we do is we have to appeal to our courage. In other words, we have to appeal and say, you know what? I know I'm anxious, but because of my morals, maybe my goals, maybe the scriptures, maybe my motivation in life, I am going to push through this anxiety because my courage tells me to. So those are some of the coping strategies that we have with anxiety. Let me close out with a couple thoughts here. I love Ed Welch. He's written some really good books. He wrote a good book on anxiety, but he has a quote that I love. It says, "The best stories are not those of victory over struggles, but of a stubborn faith in the midst of them." Isn't that cool? When somebody stands up in front of a crowd and goes, "Hey, look at me, I've overcome something, something, something," I appreciate it, but it doesn't always inspire me that much. You know what inspires me is I get inspired by people that are right in the middle of their issue. And they're like, "I ain't going nowhere. I've got friends that are our Disciples in Motion groups that we lead here in Denver. A lot of churches do these groups, but the ones here in Denver, I love the people that stand up and they go, you know what? Here's why I'm coming today, and I'm right in the middle of this thing, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to fight through it. Those are the most inspiring people. So if you're somebody or you know somebody that struggles with emotions, that struggles with anxiety or depression, they struggle with suicide ideation, be inspired by them. Be inspired. Tell them that they inspire you. Let them know, like, hey, we're all in the boat somewhere, right? All of us have our issues to deal with. None of us come through this life unscathed. We all have stuff we've got to deal with, and be inspired by them. Let me close out with this thought. I want to remind you guys that the church, I believe, is the perfect place for healing. Now, it's not the only place for healing, all right? There's private therapy. There's other groups that are really helpful. I get healing just from going to my job sometimes. Some of my best friends are the people that I work with. But I believe the church is the perfect place for healing. And here's why. I want to remind you that the church is safe and confidential, or at least it should be. The church is a place where you can open up about your lives without judgment. And I remind people all the time, I do not judge you. I will not judge you for what you're going through. I'm simply here to walk with you. The church is also a place where we're all accepted. We've all done things that are just dumb and bad, and we still do at times. But you know what? We accept one another. It doesn't matter what kind of background you've got. It doesn't matter how smart or not smart, how big, tall, short, overweight, underweight you are. It just doesn't matter. We're accepted at church. And we need to remind each other that there's no cliques. We're all one body in Christ. And even during these difficult times of tension and political stuff, we got to stay together, guys. So we accept one another. Thirdly, we're cared for at church. Listen, I got to be careful because I might start crying. The Indianapolis church has cared for me over the years. As a young man, I just had lots of struggles, and the people in that church just took care of me. They didn't judge me. They helped me out. We were a basket case, some of us back in the day. We still are, I guess. When my wife's mother died, my wife moved back to Indianapolis for 3 months to take care of the estate. You guys took care of her. You were with her. We care for one another, guys, at church. Another thing is we got purpose at church, right? I already mentioned Mike Hayes walking up to my door. He walked up to my front door on like the worst day of my life. I got kicked out of a concert. I had broke my shoulder. I was hungover. I was on drugs. I woke up that day and I thought, this is the worst day of my life. And right after I thought that, I heard the doorbell ring. And I thought the only thing that would make it worse if it's that Mike Hayes guy. And it certainly was. It was Mike Hayes. And like a fool, I didn't even open the door that day. But we have purpose, you guys. Never underestimate the power of loving another human being. There's a brother down in the Austin church who was on campus one day at the University of Texas. There was a long-haired kid throwing a Frisbee, and he just walked up and said, hey, I want to tell you about my God or something. And they studied the Bible. Just like that, he became a Christian within 2 weeks, and then he ends up marrying my daughter and brings us a grandchild, and they live with us now. That radically changed my whole family because one person remembered among his challenges, he had a purpose in life. You're important. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're a elementary age kid, a middle school kid, a high schooler, teen disciple, college, singles, professionals, whatever, married, you old guys are important. All have a role in the church. The Bible says we do. So remember that as you're healing from the issues in your life, you're still important. And then finally, let's get to know one another. Church is a great place for healing, is that we get to listen to one another. Couple quick suggestions. These are on the sheet that you can download, but for anxiety and depression, make sure you're getting your sleep and exercise. You guys, if you don't get sleep, nothing else is going to work. I can tell you that right away. You've got to get your sleep. If you've ever wanted to get control of intrusive thoughts, Google the word thought record. Just Google it, thought record. There's some really cool stuff. It's a brief journaling kind of exercise you can do in order to get control of your thoughts. Make sure you shape your environment. There's some things we can't change, but there are things that we can change about our environment. If you're an alcoholic, don't get a job being a bartender, okay? Just don't. If you struggle with political strife and tension, you might want to turn that radio off on the way to work. That radio station that argues all the time. Shape your environment. Make sure the things you can shape that you do that. Be socially connected. Nurture a dream. One of the things we always teach people at Disciples in Motion is in your recovery, you should be nurturing a dream for God, something that's bigger than you are, that you have, that will kind of help you stretch your way through your recovery. Keep dreaming for God, okay? Get God involved. Couple more thoughts here before I close out. In Indianapolis, there's all sorts of great resources. I want to remind you to think resources. There's a thing called Indianapolis NAMI, N-A-M-I. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They're a great organization, really good at educating people about mental health. So access their local chapter. They do a lot of good work there. There's also an organization called Community Mental Behavioral Health Services. They've got locations all over the area, the Indianapolis area. Make sure you check your insurance. Always ask about your insurance policy and what kind of offerings they have there, or your work EAP, your employee assistance program. And then finally, I want to remind you that on October 24th, we're going to go ahead and hold the Stronger Conference. This was going to be an all-day conference in Orlando last summer on mental health. We decided that even though we couldn't meet physically, we're going to go ahead and hire a company to host a virtual conference. It's going to be great. We're going to have probably, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 classes. It's going to be an all-day affair. You can go to classes. If you miss a class, you can just go get the recording. There's going to be a virtual room to meet people in, fellowship. I'm sure they're advertising it there in Indianapolis, but go to the conference on October 24th. And then there's a couple books that I recommend called Lost Connections by Johann Hari and Escape from Dark Places by Watkins. So that's my presentation for tonight, Indianapolis. I'm so grateful to hang out with you guys. Again, if you want to get the class notes or sign up for the weekly blog, just go to inmotioncounseling.org. And I'm now going to turn it back over to Eric and Dave Eastman to maybe a little Q&A time here.
Great. Well, Tim, thank you so much. That was outstanding. And it was very special to have you with us. Can you hear me okay there? Maybe the volume on your side needs to go up. What about now?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
All right, there we go. And great job to all of you guys too who tuned in. There's so many of us that are in there tonight. I would even encourage you, share this video out. You have friends on Facebook that need to hear this, that are inside the church, that are outside the church. So make sure before you leave to share out the video. I did get a number of questions, Tim, that we'll get to what we can. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them. So we'll just we'll dive right in. All right. The first one, could you give more thoughts, elaborate on, let's say that we have somebody in our circle that has gotten open with us about suicidal thoughts or self-harm thoughts, and just basically, when is the point that we need to get help for them? And also maybe what if somebody divulged things to us, but they gave us the don't tell anybody thing?
Yeah, that's a very important question, guys. It's like wearing a seatbelt. You can't put your seatbelt on in the middle of a car accident. Suicide ideation, we always take it seriously. We always err on the side of caution. We always get help for the person that night. So what I do is I teach churches how to have a suicide protocol. And again, it's because in our culture, we're open with one another. So we don't have the luxury to make a decision if they're serious or not. That's not our role. So what we do in our church is we go up the chain of leadership until it finds a professional. So in our church, we set up kind of a phone bank thing that if somebody hears about this, they go to somebody right away and say, listen, this is what I heard. And at the worst, it's going to be a very minor, this is just a thought that I had. But generally speaking, when people say those words, they mean it.
Yeah.
And we don't have that luxury, like I said, of maybe excusing it away. So please, if make sure, you get some professional eyes on this. Encourage them to see a counselor. If you feel like it's imminent, like it's at night, and maybe it's like a person that's been struggling before, and they're like, yeah, I've really thought about this, then call your ministry leader up, call an elder up. Have some people, I know there's staff or people in your church that are professional counselors. We always encourage churches, get a couple of those people that are kind of like willing to take that phone call to assess things. But yeah, we always take that very seriously. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, thank you for answering it. Another one. When does someone know that their anxiety or stress has reached the place of needing professional help?
Yeah. That's kind of the $64,000 question. Generally speaking, when it begins to interrupt your normal life activities. So when you notice your relationships are being damaged, you notice you've lost joy from things that used to bring you joy. Perhaps people at work have noticed you're missing days at work. Your boss is maybe concerned about you. Maybe just a good friend has noticed, like, man, you're just not the same as you used to be. When it interrupts your life, your normal life activities, that's when it's good to get eyes on it.
Okay. This one's a little faster and a little off topic. When you first met Rich Farkas, he's bald today. What did he look like that day?
You guys, I got to Indianapolis as a senior in high school, went to North Central. I was standing outside the parking lot, hitchhiking home, and the whole parking lot emptied out without picking me up. I was so mad. I hate this place. And I looked up, in this big black 1957 Rambler, Bel Air, came rumbling down 86th Street, pulls over on the side of the road. This guy sitting in there with a long frizzy hair. He looked like Peter Frampton without the guitar. And I jumped in. He gave me a cigarette. We became best friends, like from that moment on.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
That was
Now, who's
45.
Peter Frampton, though?
You wouldn't know, bro. That was over 45 years ago, just to let you know.
Wow. All right. I hope Rich is still listening. All right. Here's an interesting one. What does pushing through look like? I don't know if you use that precise wording, but kind of the, when we have those, you shared about your own personal anxiety attacks and things like that. Maybe what does pushing through look like, and maybe what should it not look like?
Yeah, boy, great question, because I never want to, like, anxiety is multifaceted. It strikes us at all sorts of different levels. It's very nuanced. So I never want to come across as if we can always just push through stuff and, look at me, I'm doing great. I think what I'm trying to get across there is some anxiety that that we need medication for. Maybe we've done everything we can and it just doesn't seem to get better. So at those times, I really encourage people to go find professional help. Medication can be really helpful to get you back to square zero. The thing about medication, it doesn't fix our anxiety. What it does, it gets us to an area where most people get to start from. So it gets us back to like ground zero kind of thing. What I'm talking about are kind of those areas that we know that we've kind of we've begun to shy away from as Christians, and we're not engaging life like we think we should. So there's times where I know, like, hey, I used to do this before. I can do this again. And again, guys, I had to take medication for a while, just to let you know. So I'm a proponent of that. I just feel like, I think what's happened is we've overdone it. And in America, I'll say this real quick. In America, we've done a medication-only conversation. to what's happened is we've quit talking about life. That book I mentioned called Lost Connections by Johann Hari, really interesting. He basically makes a point, he says medication is fine, but medication doesn't fix it. It only gets us back to where we have to still live life. But he makes a point that we become a medication-only conversation, and we quit talking about areas of our lives that are really important. So areas like meaningfulness in life, value, social circles, things that have a lot to do with our anxiety, but we don't talk about them anymore.
Wow.
So it's called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's an amazing book on this stuff.
Great. Well, I think we'll try to get 2 more. I think we'll be quick. Any quick tips for somebody that struggles with sleep? You mentioned how significant that is. Maybe a few high points of sleep tips?
Yeah. Well, number one is if you don't get your sleep, nothing else is going to work for you. It's just very foundational. I'm reading a book right now called Why We Sleep. My wife gave it to me, which indicates something there, right? So yeah, I mean, the research is pretty clear that without sleep, you're just not going to get better. So one thing is just make sure it's a major priority. There's a lot of good stuff out there on the market right now to help us with sleep. One of the big things is our screen time at night. It's pretty clear that screen time, it does things to our brain that makes it very difficult to sleep. I'd be careful about some of the hardcore sleep medication, the Ambien and those kinds of things. Those can be, especially for us older guys, it can be pretty damaging. So you got to be careful with some of that hard stuff. I personally use melatonin and some Benadryl. They're fairly harmless. They wash out of your system well. But just make sure you're reading about it and make sure you're doing something about it. Don't put up with that. They also say that you don't recover sleep. So some people say, well, I'll sleep in on the weekend, but the research says you don't, if you lose it, you lose it. It damages your body when you don't get your sleep.
Wow. Okay. Right. One last question. Aside from, somebody that's in the imminent suicide, self-harm area, any thoughts on being a good helper to somebody, maybe especially if we live with them?
Yeah, for sure. So I do this one workshop called The Insights of a 12-Year-Old, and it's all about Jesus at age 12 when they, and he ran away from home sort of at the festival, and he's supposed to be going home with mom and dad, and he didn't. He stuck around. So when they went back to find him, it took him 3 days to find them. The Bible says when they found Jesus, he was sitting with the elders. He was listening to them and asking them questions. And so I've developed a whole workshop on the importance of listening and asking questions. And listening in itself is therapeutic. Isn't it amazing? We'll pay $100 an hour for someone to listen to us. Think about it. I mean, listening is powerful. So one of the things I tell people in the church setting, at home, is we got to be better listeners. We have to park our judgments. We have to be humble. We have to hold on to our thoughts for a while to let people begin to empty their hearts out. And that's what listening is. It's an exercise of allowing people to empty out their hearts. My wife will ask me a question and I'll give her one of those, oh, I'm fine, or something like that. And then she'll ask me another question. And then she'll ask me another one. And before I know it, we're at this level. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're having a good talk, aren't we? And the reason is because instead of giving me her opinion about something, she just patiently listens. And so I think we need to do a lot more of that in the church setting is instead of kind of like giving our opinion about stuff, you can give opinions later or get the scriptures out later for sure. We always have something to say. But before we do all that, we've got to be great listeners. And then the other thing is just, I've done a lot of study on the way Jesus asked questions and the questions he asked. And, I've devoted like a lot of my time to just looking in the New Testament on his questions. And so asking questions that you think will move a conversation further down the road can be really helpful to people that are struggling.
That's great. Well, again, Tim, this was outstanding. I want to, as we get ready to close, I want to affirm something actually that you had mentioned when it comes to church. For all of us that are hearing this tonight or at a different time, I want to affirm some things that Tim said. He talked about how church should be a place that's safe, confidential, that you're accepted, that you're cared for, that you're important. And I want to make sure that everybody remembers and understands that at Rise, all these things indeed are the case with you. You're safe, you're accepted, and you're cared for. So we're that is exactly what you can always expect with the congregation. We love all of you guys. Tim, appreciate you very, very much. Remember to go check out his website and as well the other resources that he provided for us. So again, thanks, Tim, and we'll see everybody later.
Guys, thanks so much. Love you all and look forward to seeing you soon.